In 2005, the World Wildlife Foundation published a report prepared for it by the CSIRO. Jumping the Garden Fence, invasive garden plants in Australia, detailed the 10 most damaging invaders. Numbered among them is this plant, Gazania, along with all of its varieties. A native of southern Africa, Gazania is wrecking the coastal ecosystems of southeast Australia. 27,000 alien plants have been introduced to Australia since colonial times. 2,800 are now firmly established or naturalised. The ornamental gardening industry is responsible for the introduction of 2/3 of these worst invaders, that is more than 1,800. It was recommended that the 10 plants most damaging to the Australian environment, Gazania among them, be prohibited from sale from the 1st of July 2005. 5 years later, this film clearly shows that it hasn't happened yet. It becomes apparent that in the nursery industry, profit takes precedence over the natural environment. Being a drought-resistant perennial that flowers several times a year has encouraged landscape architects to specify Gazanias in plantings, especially near beaches. As if this wasn't bad enough, the nursery industry sometimes claims that the varieties of Gazania it sells are hybrids and as such are unable to reproduce. Well, somebody should tell them that that's not the case, because this variety at my feet, recently planted and distinctive by virtue of its lightly coloured foliage, is spreading into the dunes of Mona Vale beach. Pioneer plants are those that first colonise bare sand, so they tend to be found nearest the ocean. This beautiful grass is spinifex, and it has long stolons that grow vigorously to bind the sand. Scaevola, a fleshier plant, follows behind the spinifex and mingles with it, as does native pigface. But Gazania outcompetes these natives, probably because it exudes chemicals into the soil that suppress the growth of nearby plants, and certainly because, like most weeds, it produces copious amounts of seed. Here we have one plant with 20 flowers, and here I'm cutting a flower open to show you just how many seeds it holds. They're still a bit sticky, but in an hour's time they'll be dry. I've counted at least 65 seeds, so times 20 flowers gives us a potential 1,300 new plants from just that one small clump alone. Understanding this brings the realisation that most native plants will not survive on this beach unless we start to deal with the invaders decisively. Seeds fall to take root around the perimeter of the parent plant, and they cause the clump to expand outwards in a ring. In this way, a single plant can become a virtual carpet. Seeds are also blown into the hind dunes, where they take root under coastal wattle. Without sufficient light, they'll struggle, but coastal wattle has a relatively short lifespan of about 8 years. When it dies back, the Gazania beneath is exposed to extra sunlight and will then grow vigorously to quickly fill the vacated space. In this way, Gazania marches inland and up dune, all the time preventing the proliferation of native species. Unfortunately, Gazania is resistant to herbicides, and that includes glyphosate, the most commonly used one. This leaves manual control as the main means of dealing with Gazania, and that's code for hard work. However, this isn't as daunting as it sounds. Now, you'd probably think that the most important thing is simply to kill the plant, and ultimately that's true. But there's not much point in killing the parent plant if you leave hundreds of seeds behind. So the first thing to do is remove the flowers to make sure its seeds will never regenerate. Simply bagging them and tying off the bag to drop in a rubbish bin will suffice. The plant can then be uprooted. Any sand left clinging to the roots must be shaken out. It should then be placed upside down so the exposed roots will be dried out by the sun and the wind. They'll be dead in a week or so and will eventually break down to leave just a little mulch, which will give any surrounding natives a boost. Larger clumps can be levered up and rolled back like a carpet. But once out of the ground, they should be unrolled so as to leave the roots pointing skywards. You can prop the plants up by stacking them against each other. Take care not to cover any existing natives because we want them to grow quickly to fill in the gaps we've created. Usually it's best to stack the up-ended Gazanias in the same place where they grew. So long as there are natives left within a metre or two, the natives will infill, but if there was nothing but Gazania in the first place, it will be necessary to plant natives, like Coria, Pelargonium, native thistle and of course Spinifex and Scaevola. It's logical to think that after the plant has been pretty well eliminated, you can forget about Gazania altogether. But you can't, because there are always new seeds blowing in, and there will always be the flowers that drop that you missed, or the wattle that dies back to let hidden Gazanias surge forth. So whenever you take a walk along your beach, make sure you have a plastic bag in your pocket to deal with any flower you see, and after you've bagged it, pull the offending plant out and leave its roots exposed to the sun. That protects the investment you've made with all your hard work. So now the entire beach is your garden, and once it's filled with native plants to the exclusion of invaders, it'll be even more beautiful.